This week on Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke, we welcome guest Bill Gasiamis, host of the Recovery After Stroke podcast, where he shares conversations with stroke survivors and the challenges they are overcoming. After experiencing a hemorrhagic stroke, Bill embarked on a journey of recovery and growth. He details this in his book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. Through his work, Bill guides others on a path to post-traumatic growth after stroke. In this episode, we dive into an inspiring story of stroke recovery and personal transformation. Bill reveals how stroke became a turning point for overcoming the victim mindset, embracing responsibility, and finding strength through communal support. Tune in to discover how resilience and post-traumatic growth can emerge from life's most challenging moments. Thank you for joining us for Part 1, Bill Gasiamis' story.
Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke. Stroke offers a powerful, life-changing shift in perspective. Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. Beyond Stillness offers a moment of pause for storytelling and reflection. Ultimately, we are a welcoming environment that reveres the moment beyond stroke's paralysis. Still moments unite humanity and divinity. I'm your host, Molly Bucola. And now we take a moment of pause to honor the wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope that are alive in our hearts. And we give thanks. Bill Gasiamis' story.
When I was a kid, my report card always had the same feedback. Most of my teachers agreed. Bill is very capable, but needs to put in more effort. Bill is easily distracted. Bill needs to take responsibility for his own actions. Upon reflection, the criticism was fair and warranted, but I wasn't ready to change. I guess they expected that after telling me to stop misbehaving, I would. But as a child, I didn't know how to change my behavior, let alone my outlook. As I grew up, my boyhood approach developed into a false sense of victimization. As a kid, I blamed my teachers and classmates when I was reprimanded. I took it personally. I thought they had a problem with me rather than my behavior. I carried my victimized mindset into the workforce. Even in self-employment, when the clients critiqued our work, I always found a way to blame them. I did exactly what clients told me to do, but deep down, I knew it was at the bare minimum. They would get annoyed, and I felt like a victim of their response. After a cycle of similar circumstances, I went to see a counsellor. She asked, "Could it be you?" I didn't take it well. If I acknowledged that I was part of the problem, I would have to do something about it. And I was too busy for that. It would be easier if everyone changed for me. Then when I woke on Friday, February the 3rd, 2012, the weather forecast was a sunny high of 27 degrees Celsius, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, A perfect day for outdoor work. I noticed my big left toe felt strange. I didn't give it a second thought and went about the day as a painting contractor. That evening, my wife Christine and I took our children, Peter and John, for a night out. 2 days later, on Sunday, my usual gym session was disrupted. The numbness had spread to my entire foot and ankle. It was a weird sensation. While running on the treadmill, I wondered why my left foot was all over the place. It wasn't landing correctly. The next morning, 3 days after, first noticing my numb toe, I got out of bed and found the numbness spread to the rest of my leg. The whole leg felt like it was asleep and there were pins and needles throughout. I continued my routine and went to work. Preoccupied with the whole situation, I thought I had pinched a nerve and went to the chiropractor. After a chat and an examination, he found nothing conclusive but suggested anti-inflammatory medication. That evening, Christine noticed I was walking funny, but I dismissed her concerns, insisting it was just a back issue. Wednesday, now 5 days after initially feeling a numb toe, I called the chiropractor again and made another appointment for Friday. By Thursday, I couldn't feel the majority of my left side, from my toes up to my neck. Friday, while working, I struggled to climb a ladder. I used my numb left hand and helpful right to pick up my knee and lift the left leg onto the first rung and continued working. My chiro and my wife insisted I go to the hospital that evening. After some tests, a CT scan revealed a shadow on the right side of my brain. The doctor mentioned it could be a bleed or a tumour, and I was admitted overnight for further blood tests and an MRI. The next morning, I called Lawrence, my work colleague, to inform him I couldn't work that day. Overwhelmed, I burst into tears, realizing I was ill-equipped to handle the situation. How was I going to manage this new way of life? I was barely making it through my daily work without being held up in the hospital. I was in the ward for a couple of days reflecting on my situation. The room was bright with a window pushing in the sun. All I could think about was the work piling outside that window. My new reality hadn't set in. Instead, I was trying to keep my head above water in a life that had already set sail. Work weighed on me. While hooked to machines pumping life into my veins and monitoring my current state, I stared at my computer on the hospital tray my food was served on. My guys were going to show up to the job site and needed my direction. My clients depended on my communication. I had yet to realize that I simply needed to stay alive. I remained in the hospital for 7 days, then was sent home on orders to avoid work and strenuous activity. I wasn't even allowed to drive. How does one get caught up at work as a painting contractor with orders like that? When I returned home, I was on medication that made me hallucinate. I felt bugs crawling on my skin and couldn't sleep. I was angry too. The steroids made me so angry. I wondered about the medication's long-term effects. One morning, just before dawn, Christine's alarm rang out. I had been laying awake since 2 a.m., at which point I shot up to the edge of my bed and shared a conversation with the wall. I didn't know what was imagined and what was real. Hallucinations. "What happened to you last night?" Christine asked. "I have no idea," I replied. "It was scary to experience." Christine grimaced. "I wonder if this is due to the bleed or the meds." "I don't know, but today I'm going to find out," I announced. That morning, the house was noisy. The kids got dressed, collected school bags, and sat down to breakfast. The smell of warm, toasted bread filled the kitchen. This was the first time I noticed the screeching sound of a knife spreading condiments on toast. Everything felt so overwhelming and loud. The chairs scraped across the timber floorboards. I never noticed that sound before, and now it was deafening. I wanted a quiet house to myself so I could rest. Like a well-orchestrated military campaign, they all simultaneously embarked on their respective days at school and work. The symphony of byes, see you later, have a good day, and I love you led to the thud of the front door. A big thud, bigger than I'd noticed before. Then the house felt silent. I quickly grabbed my laptop, plugged it in, and sat at the kitchen table. As I waited impatiently for the home screen to load, I was planning my first Google search. How do you decrease inflammation in the brain naturally? I was done with these side effects. The screen loaded. I didn't know it then, but it was at this moment my life completely changed. My pre-stroke mindset would have blamed the doctors for giving me the medication, and I would have continued to take them, thinking there's nothing I could do about it. Instead of blaming others and continuing the easiest route, I started to take responsibility for my own healing, my own recovery. But nobody's perfect. 6 weeks later, I returned to work against doctor's orders. I felt dizzy and sick in the stomach. Mildly suspicious that I might be experiencing another bleed, I made my way to the hospital. Christine dropped me 50 meters away from the ER door. In the time it took me to arrive to the triage nurse's desk, my condition worsened. I didn't know my name, and I could not tell them the purpose of my visit. I blacked out. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed with wires attached to my body and a strange lady at my bedside asking me impossible questions like, "Do you know who I am?" It was my wife, Christine. I didn't recognize her. Everyone panicked. 3 days later, my mind struggled to begin sentences. My short-term memory was labored. I couldn't regulate my emotions and was plagued by fatigue. They sent me home. There I sat on the couch in, well, La La Land. The world was swirling on around me, and I was in and out of sleep. When I was awake, I did more research online, again looking for ways to reduce inflammation. I kept running across the importance of nutrition. Before my stroke, I wasn't one to diet. Trying to change any habit is difficult, but something as ingrained as eating seemed like a monstrous habit to alter. But I was up for the task. I was ready to put in the extra effort. Right after my stroke, I cut out alcohol. I didn't like that it had similar sensations to those leading to the stroke. Then I cut out sugar. For me, that wasn't too difficult, except for the heaps of Coca-Cola I drank daily, which led me to caffeine. I was using 2 to 3 cups of coffee each day to keep me awake and going. And you can imagine the more fatigue I felt, the more I wanted to down the coffee. But this was my new way of life. I was willing to take responsibility and to put in the extra effort, so I quit caffeine too. 2 years later, I was clean of alcohol, sugar and caffeine. My thyroid condition urged me to give up gluten. That was the most difficult. I'm from a Greek family, and everything is served on bread. And a big plate of pasta is so comforting. That was the problem, the food coma. Pasta would exacerbate my fatigue, so I excluded gluten. By that time, I was aware of the way I felt after eating. Dairy was the last to go. I was less bloated and congested at that point. I didn't have cramps or hurried dashes to the restroom. To this day, I'm clean and clear of alcohol, sugars, caffeine, gluten, and dairy. I took the extra step, read the research, listened to my body, and advocated for myself. I work each day to take responsibility for my own healing. Unfortunately, 2 years later, while driving, my whole left side started burning. It was so odd, but by this point I knew I needed to connect with doctors when perplexed about my body. I drove right to the hospital and told the triage nurse I was having a stroke. The CT scan confirmed another brain bleed. 2 weeks later, I went in for surgery. I lost use of my entire left side. This time, I was more prepared and educated. I spent a week in the hospital and 4 weeks in inpatient rehab. I was educated, motivated, and fired up, ready to recover. I had overcome the victim mindset by then and was committed to eating well. Now it was time to devote myself to physical activity. As you can imagine, growing up, I was a half-assed athlete. In my late 20s, I joined a soccer club that was known for the social aspect more than its athleticism. I had a lot of fun with my bros. Physical therapy doesn't work without the extra effort. That's the point, to push yourself. I needed to walk and use my left hand. I needed to get my whole left side back. I knew I could do more than my therapists were asking of me, so one day I've pushed myself further. I crossed the street to a playground that was equipped with every form of kid fun. I stuck to the outdoor basketball court to try to run straight on the pavement. It was a bit scary because I had taken a few falls in the house, but I had the learning to ride your bike mentality. I knew I would fall, but pretended that it wasn't an option. At first, my left knee gave out. It would collapse. It felt like a free fall and would come out of nowhere, like when my buddies would use the front of their knee to hit the back of mine, and I'd just buckle. My left knee would buckle. It was fitting that I was on a playground while relearning to run. I needed to evoke my younger self. If I didn't relearn, I was going to miss out. I wouldn't be able to keep up with the others. I had to do it. So I put in the extra effort and believed I could do it. I was rewriting my learned half-assery. When I finally ran without falling, I commended myself for putting in the extra effort and taking responsibility for my healing. I wish my pre-stroke self could see me now. I wish my primary school teachers could witness this. After experiencing such trauma, I was growing. My post-traumatic growth was in motion. I was a changed man, but there was still something missing. I felt very isolated. My family was supportive, but there was no way for them to completely understand. My friends and co-workers ranged from overwhelming support to ignorance of the whole situation. The next step of my recovery was the social, emotional piece. In order to go further, I needed to invite others into my healing. I sought professional counseling again. This is not a common move in my circles, but I knew it was important. My counselor helped me realize the importance of interpersonal relationships. Before my stroke, I was a firm believer in doing things on my own. I ran my business solo, carried my own burdens, and prided myself on being self-sufficient. But when the stroke hit, that became near impossible. Suddenly, I was faced with a reality I couldn't navigate by myself. I had to admit that I needed help, and that was one of the hardest pills to swallow. But it was also the most liberating. I began volunteering to raise awareness about stroke to help others avoid going through what I was going through, which led me to, as you might guess, other people in the stroke community. These were people who understood the struggle. I began to surround myself with people who were also on a journey of post-traumatic growth, and that made all the difference. When I finally reached out to my counsellor and the stroke community, it felt like a weight had been lifted. Involving others in my recovery wasn't just beneficial, it was essential. I remember one of the first stroke survivors I met, Antonio. We were in training to speak on behalf of the Stroke Foundation Australia. His deficits were much more noticeable than mine, but his personality shined brighter. He engaged with everyone and was always one of the first to participate. Antonio and Stroke Foundation Australia began to teach me that together we are stronger, more resilient, and better equipped to handle whatever life throws our way. These experiences have redefined how I live every day, ensuring that I turn up in the world as someone who embraces community, growth, and the power of asking for help. And for that, I am forever grateful. Including others in my recovery took courage to admit that I couldn't do it all on my own. And in doing so, I opened the door to a level of healing I never thought possible. Stroke is the best thing that happened to me. In fact, that's what I titled my book. The traumatic experience kicked me into gear. I no longer think my situation is everyone else's fault. I take responsibility for myself. I conduct research and make my own choices and commit to putting forth the extra effort. And all this led me to a community of thriving people who do the same. Post-traumatic growth inspired me to conduct research on fellow stroke survivors. I interviewed others who declared that stroke was the best thing that happened to them and eventually published a book on such. Now I often speak publicly on stroke recovery and host a weekly podcast called Recovery After Stroke. These are the physical manifestations of my new mindset, one that is open, growth-oriented, and deeply rooted in the power of community. These lessons and achievements haven't just stayed within the confines of my recovery. They've guided me in my daily life, shaping how I show up and participate in the world. I'm more present, more engaged, and more willing to lean on others. The way I interact with my family, friends, and even my business has transformed. I'm now someone who values collaboration over going at it alone, who seeks opportunities to grow alongside others rather than in isolation. I am thankful for the unexpected way that stroke became the best thing that happened.
Today, we close with a moment of pause to honor the way that Bill Gasiamis shared wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope. And we give thanks.
Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org. Another way to support is to like, share, or subscribe to our weekly show. Again, thank you for devoting time and space for this week's episode of Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke.
Thank you for joining us for Part 1, Bill Gasiamis' story. For the full story, listen to Part 2, Bill Gasiamis' interview. Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. Today, Bill shared how he turned his stroke experiences into a catalyst for personal growth. He converted his long-held victim mindset into a life of personal responsibility, action, and advocacy. Even the hardest challenges can lead to unexpected strength and transformation. Remember, as part of the stroke community, you are more than supportive. You are inspirational. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with others and consider donating to Beyond Stillness Stories After Stroke.
If you are part of the stroke community and have a story you'd like to share on the show, please contact us. Email molly@beyondstillness.org.